And so what we're going to look at today are the new capabilities of Squirrel365 and InfoBurst that were released earlier this year, how they work together and how the integration takes the combination to a whole new level. And because there are a number of people online here who come from the InfoBurst world who probably aren't that au fait with Squirrel, and people from the Squirrel world who aren't that au fait with InfoBurst, what I want to do for the first 7 minutes or so is just to go over some of the background to this to bring everybody up to the same level so we can then dig into the new features that have come along, as I say, add this significant value to the two products. So first of all, we're going to do a quick InfoBurst overview. So what is InfoBurst? InfoBurst is a sophisticated platform that manages data out of data sources such as SAP Business Objects, both directly into universes and from Webby documents, but also SQL queries from just about any database, and also Excel files on the server. And it takes those data sources and allows you to do a multitude of things with them. So the first thing it allows you to do is to burst content from there, which takes content, delivers it out to a schedule. You can deliver it to email, you can deliver it to network folders or FTP shares or things like that, so that people get maybe to their inboxes just relevant information, reports that they need as and when they need them because they're done to a recurring schedule. It also allows you to bridge the gap between SAP Business Objects and Tableau and Power BI by allowing you to schedule data transfers between the two. So you can take data from the SAP platform and schedule it out to, say, a Tableau hyperfile. And so it bridges that gap, because we know that many organizations who are historically use a lot of business objects, are still using a lot of business objects for reporting and dashboarding, are now using Tableau and or Power BI for more self-service capability. And this is really a great sort of bridge in the middle between those two worlds. It allows you to take advantage of all the data you've got managed under the SAP umbrella and bring it into that new self-service world that you're working with. It allows all of this to happen against various data sources, against schedules, and allows you to basically take any piece of information you want, get it into the format you want, deliver it out over the channel you want, to get it in the hands of end users in the most appropriate way at the right time, so they can just do what they need with it. So, there's just so much to the platform as we go through, and in fact, you can't really sum it all up in a diagram. So here are just some of the features. Don't plan to go through all of these, but if you see something on here that you think might be useful, then this is one of the things that InfoBurst does. So the data sources at one side can take that data and put it into different output formats. I didn't mention before, it's got a high performance cache underpinning it, so you can, and we'll look at that in a minute as to how you can use that to offload work from the database. It's got SQL write back. We'll look at that again in a Squirrel context. You can then burst Webby, Desky, and Crystal reports from the Business Objects platform, SQL Server reporting services. You can use dynamic parameters. You've got multipass across those for bursting. Various destinations, I said email, you can burst it to a network, to FTP, back into Business Objects. And actually, these are just the sort of the summary, the depth. If you go onto the InfoSol website and look at the InfoBurst capabilities, there are many more in each of these categories. You can schedule things on a date-time basis or an event basis, deliver out in all those formats. And then you've got, as you dig more in, you've got more sophisticated features to split and merge content, compress and encrypt, group stuff together into one single delivery, have management alerts when things run or don't run. And it's all done through a full web-based admin interface, so you can manage it from pretty much anywhere. It really is a very fully functional data management platform for SQL and Business Objects and Tableau and Power BI. But obviously, in the context of today, we're going to look at InfoBurst and Squirrel. And the pieces of InfoBurst up until now that have been relevant to Squirrel have been this capability to take data from data sources we were talking about, SAP Business Objects, SQL databases, and as I say, SQL, that works, as we'll see, through an ODBC driver, so you can get to pretty much any data source out there in the market. And in fact, beyond SQL data sources to some non-SQL data sources, they also have ODBC connectors. So there really is a wide variety of connectivity that allows. And also for server-side Excel, which doesn't sound like an enterprise data source, but we all know what data landscapes are like, and sometimes just being able to get data into Excel and deliver it into the same system alongside the more enterprise data sources can be very valuable. And then InfoBurst then marshals that data out of those data sources into Squirrel. And you'll see that there are two-way arrows between Squirrel and InfoBurst and SQL, because it does allow data to flow through InfoBurst out to Squirrel, but also data back from Squirrel to InfoBurst and back to the database. And we'll look at that write back capability a little later on. That's the background of what InfoBurst is and how it interacts with Squirrel. But I want to go one step deeper into the existing connection between Squirrel and InfoBurst before we look at the new features just released. And so what I want to look at here is how you read data in Squirrel from InfoBurst, how you parameterize it, how you create a cache, and how you write back. I'm going to do maybe 5 minutes of very simple demos to give you a flavor for that. Some of you will be deeply steeped in this, and I apologize. You can probably switch off for the next 5 minutes, although maybe something that you will catch on to that you didn't know before. But this is to give people who have not used this functionality before the background that you will cover some of the stuff in the new features, particularly as we're going to be looking at offline dashboards, and they depend on some of this infrastructure. So if you know all of this, then just bear with us for the next few minutes, and we'll do a quick refresh to bring everyone up to the right level, and then we'll go on to the new capabilities. So and this is all going to be done via demo, so there's no slides on this. So I'm going to come into Squirrel. Well, actually, I'm not going to start in Squirrel. I'm going to start in InfoBurst. So here I am in InfoBurst. I log on. This is the web-based interface that I was talking about before. And if I come in and go to my webinar folder, so this is where I'm going to have all my objects for today that I'm going to be working on. And what I've got here is I have a data source. And that was one of these data sources I talked about. It can be various things. This is a SQL data source. It's connected through ODBC. You'll see that there are native connections to SQL Server and Oracle, but this one is ODBC set up on this machine here. And it's going through to a database called Demo. And because we're going to be looking at these, this database here. It's called Retail Sales. Those of you who've been around a long time will recognize it, but we won't go into that. And so this is the data set that we're going to be looking at just for this little sample that we're doing now. So what I want to do inside here is, on top of a connection, so I've connected to that database using SQL, I can now add queries. Now these are some of the queries we'll use in a minute, but I'm just going to start from scratch and add a new query. I'm going to call that Retail Sales, and that's just going to be select star from Retail Sales. So I save that away and then run it. Then we get an initial preview of the data set that's in Retail Sales, and you'll see that that is exactly just this data here. So we're in the demo database, we're in the Retail Sales table, and I've just selected everything from it. Now that's about 10,000 rows of data, which we could bring into Squirrel and then start manipulating in the spreadsheet, but actually it's often better to process that in the database, so you're bringing back less data. So what we're going to do here is just summarize this a little. So I'm going to say state, select state, and some revenue from Retail Sales group by state. It's a very simple sort of aggregated query. Now if I run that, we'll see we've got the various states and their total revenue from the database. And having done that, that's all I need to do to start with, then to be able to see some data in Squirrel. So I come to Squirrel and I add a connection type in here. So actually, I'm going to open my InfoBurst start, and you'll see why in a minute. Just a few things to make it slightly quicker, boring you with some of the typing in I would need to do. Otherwise, I'm going to go to a database query. Then the first thing I'm going to use from the sheet is the name of my InfoBurst server. So I'm now connecting to InfoBurst. That's on this URL here. I have to log into that, so I get secure access to what's in there. And then that connection, as we saw, was called Demo. And in here, I'm going to this query I've just created, which is Retail Sales. And then I say, well, I want to put that into my spreadsheet. Obviously, the thing about Squirrel is you want it in the spreadsheet. So I come in here and I say I'm going to put it into those cells there. So now, having done just that, I can say debug, and we see it's running it. And as it loads up this data here. So if I can take Control-C to take a copy of that so I can work with it at design time, Control-V to paste it in here, maybe give it a little formatted header just to make it look that little bit nicer, put black and white on there, maybe put that to the left. like that. And then I'm just going to put a data table on here just to show you how you would, I mean, obviously there's so many things you could do with Squirrel at this point. This is going to maybe be like that. So now what I've got is when I preview this, you can't see that it is actually loading that as I preview that. So that's loading directly from the underlying database, the data coming out of Squirrel. So you can see that if I delete this at design time, so there's no data in there, but I preview, then hey presto, it all appears. So I'm now, with those few clicks, I've managed to connect back to an enterprise backend database where the database is doing most of the work. All that's being returned, literally, this is all the data that's being returned into Squirrel. All the processing is being done on the database. So that will scale just as much as the database will scale. So you're offloading to the place that is most appropriate to do that data manipulation. But that's that's obviously relatively straightforward, but you might want different sets of data in here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go back here and change this a little. Rather than saying, and one of the powerful features of InfoBurst in combination with Squirrel is I can use parameters by putting the @ symbol before a name like that, grouped by the summary as well. So I'm saying select whatever I put in summary and the sum of the revenue from retail sales grouped by whatever I put in the summary. So I save that and run that. I can now do what I did before. So I can push in state. That gives it me by state, but I can also say line. And so rather than the states down there, I've got the lines in there. So I've got a dynamic query, and I can now run this from Squirrel as well. So if I come back in here, if I come back to my my query and I reselect it from here, we see I've now got this parameter. It knows that the server has that parameter. And I say I want to bind it to a summary. And so what I'm going to do here is just bind it to this cell here and make that yellow so we know it's the cell we're dealing with. So if I put state in there and then run this, then we get the data by state. If I put line in here, then I get the data by line. Let me make that a little bigger so that you can see it all. There we go. So we get it by line. Now, obviously, what I want to do in Squirrel is maybe put in a drop down. That drop down is going to be populated by these here. I could derive those from the database potentially. I could get them from somewhere else, but I've just typed them in for this simple demo. And then I say the label of this is going to be inserted in there. And so now when I run this, I've got a dynamic that's by line. Now, the reason it's not updated, I need to keep myself honest, is that it doesn't know to refresh that. So I suppose that what that displays is it genuinely going back to the database, because I can say here, I want to refresh when something changes. So when I change the summary, I want it to refresh. And now, if I come in here and say I want city, it'll go to city. I go to state, it'll go to state, and if I go to quarter, it'll go to quarter. So I now have, and that's dynamically executing queries against databases, the MySQL database in this case, but could be any of the supported databases going through the InfoBurst platform. And then the final thing we're going to do here is add on a little extra and say that I want to, because what you'll notice if I come to my database here, I've got data in there. See the year column, I've got 2010, 2011, 2012, and it doesn't make sense for it to add up right across all of those years. So when I run this, that's like a 3-year number, which doesn't really make much sense. And so what we can do is come in here, and what I'm going to say is add an extra condition in here where year equals at year. So again, that's going to be parameterized. So I save that and run. I can say I want to summarize by line, and I want it for 2010, and that's now 2010. If I do notice, say that's 2646. If I run that for 2011, that number is different. So it's again, it's doing that. I come back to Squirrel and go back to my query, reselect it. I've now got that year. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Put the year in here, make it yellow. I'll do Control C, Control V to duplicate that, and then obviously that now takes these and it inserts it into there. Default it to 2010, and so now I've got a completely wired up. I can do it by city. I can do different years. No, sorry, once again, yeah, this isn't working because I haven't told it needs to refresh when this is refreshed. And so we're just going to have a trigger here, which is just equal to this value concatenated with this value. So whenever either of those changes, that changes. So I just go into my connection, say to make it update on that instead, and then that will now work. So I can say by city, and that's 525. If I go to 2011, it's one over a million, and it's back down here. So I've got full sort of dynamic support. It's really easy to get data from underlying corporate data sources, and you can see not only is this doing the summary, but maybe it's doing filters as well, so that it's really getting a small amount of data every time. So it's not a lot of effort to bring it back over the network. It's going against the underlying database. So as I say, that's the best place for that to be. Now, the interesting thing is that, as I say, that's going against the database. But every time I change one of those drop downs, it's going against the underlying database. But as I said, one of the great things about InfoBurst is its ability to cache data. So this connection query is going directly against the database. But if I go back to my original query here, which is the full set for me, what I can use InfoBurst to do is I can say I'm going to add an XDC, which is a cache based on this. That's the retail cache. Save that away. And where's the source going to come from? It's going to come from that retail sales query. So this is another layer where I can now sort of say, actually, sorry, I have to XDC. So that's now going and taking the data. You can see the log here of what's going on. It's taking that query and logging it and pulling it into the InfoBurst cache. There we go. So now what I've got is I've got a cache that's based on this data source, and I can do a query on top of that cache. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that query I had before. So not the select star from retail sales. I'm going to this here. So this has got the two prompts in it. So if I save that away, what I can do is rather than having this query here, I'm going to add against an XDC cache query. So this time, again, I have to log against the server. And it's going to be the retail cache. I need to name this query. I save that away. Now if I come here against retail cache, I can select my retail sales query, and then I'm going to bind that into the same place that I had before, which is this set of data here. And again, my parameters, I can bind to there, into there, then done that. There, this one is in there, and it updates. There we go. So now when I do this, the same thing is happening. You can maybe see it slightly quicker. The data is so small that doesn't really make much difference. But that is now going against the cache. And the great thing, and we won't go into this in too much detail because we've got other things to look at, but the great thing now is that cache can be scheduled. So I can go and say I want to have a new schedule. I can schedule that cache every morning at sort of 5 a.m. They can retry, I can time out, I can do all these things. I can alert if it doesn't work. And so that will be sort of up-to-date data as far as the user is concerned, but taking the load off the database. A great capability to be able to it just shows the flexibility of InfoBurst and what it offers to Squirrel. And then the final thing that we're going to look at here, if I come out and then I'm going to open, this is a little database, it's a little project. This is going against this retro toys database, which is here. It's just a little database that I created based on toys from my childhood. I don't know if anyone will recognize them. And basically what it allows us to do is to come in here, it brings in data. Each of these is bringing from the database. If I click, say, on this here, I go to the invoices, I click on Etch-a-Sketch, and now I can actually update these. So let's go and have a look at the database. So I've got Hot Wheels in invoice 1010. So if I go to Hot Wheels invoices 1010, that's for 4. So I change that to 400. And click update. And if I come back to my database, you see it's now updated to 400. If I come here and say it's only 4, well, let's say 67, just to be clear, it's something different. Come back here and there it's like 67. And that's all being done in a very similar fashion. I've got these 3 queries that are getting my invoices, my products, my customer orders. That's all the dynamic data read from the database. But this is getting the update. So it's writing back to the database And so we can send in the parameters, and I'm sending in the quantity and the invoice number to go back, and that transforms into, we come in here, retro invoice update is just an update statement. Similarly, again, I get the quantity and invoice, and that writes it back to the database. So that is a quick overview, and apologies if it was too quick for those that don't know it and too long for those of you who do. Hopefully we struck somewhere in the middle where you can read, parameterize, get a cache data and write back to a SQL data from InfoBurst from Squirrel. And it's like an incredibly powerful capability to get data into Squirrel from an enterprise style sort of on-premise database. Or I say on-premise, but actually I've used InfoBurst to go against Snowflake and other cloud databases, so it doesn't have to be on-premise. The databases can actually be anywhere, provided they're accessible through an ODBC connection. The next bit is the new features. So Squirrel and InfoBurst new features, and as I say, these are the latest releases of the product are required to do this. So Squirrel 1.10, which was released back in December, and InfoBurst 2022.1, which was released back in January. So those two are the ones that you'll need to work together to see these capabilities. And the three things we're going to look at is the ability to host Squirrel content in the InfoBurst portal, the ability to run Squirrel inside PowerPoint, but without having to publish it to the cloud. So a number of people have said, we like this idea of putting a Squirrel project inside PowerPoint, but before 1.10, you had to publish that to the cloud. Now, some people are saying, well, particularly in the context of today, where I've got on-premise data from my corporate data source, IT guys or security guys are saying we don't want to post that out to the cloud, even though that data is actually not going to the cloud. Anything going to the cloud, people say, I don't want to do that. I want to keep it all behind the firewall. Well, up until 1.10, that would not have been possible to get that into PowerPoint, but that's all changed with this new capability. And then the last thing here is offline, taking dashboards offline with data from the underlying database. So we're going to look first at the portal. And so if we come back here, and I come into my portal, what I see is I've got some folders in my portal. Going to my dashboard folder, I've got 4. In fact, I'm going to go and edit that because that's the one I'm going to add in a minute. There we go, take it away. And so I've now got these 3 dashboards, having deleted that one. And we can start to see it's obviously just a Squirrel. This is a calculator, an example calculator we've got for how long it would take to transfer data under various pricing plans for a backup company. This one is a lovely dashboard created by Josh Tapley. It's really nice, just so smooth and works nicely. So it's typical of the sort of things that Josh creates. And so that's in the portal here as well. And then finally we have another one that was originally created by Timo Elliott at SAP. It's a nice one. It's just sort of a PowerPoint overload calculator, and sort of like too many slides make people fall off their chairs. And it's all the things. Obviously, this is inside the InfoBurst portal, but everything you've got in Squirrel is capable. It's anything you have in Squirrel is available here. So the question then is, well, how do I get these dashboards into the InfoBurst portal? And the answer to that is I come in here, say File New, and then I'm going to open this dashboard here, which is a little animation I wrote about sort of the pandemic and why the R factor makes such a difference. And if we come in and preview this, actually I won't talk about this here, I'll talk about it when it's in the portal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to publish it. And to publish it, you have to publish it locally. And then I'm going to publish it out to my folder here, to my webinar folder. I'm going to call this R-anim. And importantly, I've export it as a .dash file. So now if I export that there, that's now creating that file. So then I can come back, we'll just wait for the export, so sure it's there. 1, 2, 3, done, right? That's there. It'll appear in my catalog. So I've got control over it. I can actually, that's published to live. If I move it back to drafts, it would mean that was no longer available. So I have got control here to remove it if I want, I don't want to do that in the InfoBurst portal, but I come to the InfoBurst portal, just upload it. All I need to do is upload .dash, choose the file. There's the R-anim dashboard in that there. Say upload, and there it is in there. I come in here, and there I've got my dashboard here. Well, it's not a dashboard, this is a little Squirrel animation project. And what it really does is it says how quickly I a virus will go through the population depending on the R factor. And it was just to show people how sensitive it is, the R factor. The R factor doesn't have to be very high or it starts rising very quickly, and it's only 1.22. A lot of people kept saying to me, well, it's only 1.1 or 1.2. That doesn't seem much more than 1. Why does it make such a difference? So that was just a little animation for that. But the nice thing here it is inside the portal. However, if you look here, I've got all the capability to do all the things that you saw before. But one of the great things about InfoBurst, it manages users for you as well. So if I log out of here, and then I say I'm going to go just to the portal, and then I log in as Alice, and Alice only has portal access. So there she comes in, and she doesn't have actions to upload. She doesn't get to any of the other things. You can just see the content in the folder she has access to, but she has access to all of these, say the Josh's dashboard here, so she can see them there. So it's a really nice way to deliver in an enterprise environment, to be able to securely deliver different dashboards, different people through a portal interface. So that's the first thing that we have here, which is the integration with the InfoBurst portal. But then the next thing, which is very closely related, is access to PowerPoint. And so if we come back to the screen here, so Alice is viewing this dashboard. What Alice thinks, well, hold on a second, I want to show this to people when I'm doing my next presentation, but I don't want to have to flip out into the InfoBurst portal. I just want to be able to show it inside PowerPoint. So she can come here and say, I want to get the PowerPoint embed ID. That's the ID, but just by doing this, as it says here, the value below has been copied to the clipboard, so that's already done for me. And then, so if I come back to PowerPoint, I'm going to come out of here. And what I need to do to embed it in PowerPoint is to use the PowerPoint viewer. Now, if I come here to the insert menu, so go to insert, and then I go to my add-ins, there are two I've got here. One is Squirrel365 Presenter, which you will find in the Microsoft Store. That's not the one we want. That's the one that'll render content from the cloud, from the Squirrel cloud. Up here, we've got the InfoBurst Dash Presenter, which is the one that we want here. And this needs to be installed on the local network. There are instructions, the documentation as to how to do that. But once you have that, users can see that. It comes up here. If I post that ID that we got from InfoBurst, I come in here, it loads up, and there I have Josh's dashboard sitting inside PowerPoint. No need for that dashboard to be sitting in the cloud. This is all done inside the firewall. Shift F5 to see that screen. All the capabilities that we saw before in this dashboard are there, but sitting inside PowerPoint, all inside the firewall, for a corporate presentation rather than having to push it out to the cloud. So a nice step forward. So not only can you put it in the portal, but putting it in the portal then allows you to put it into PowerPoint. So those are the first two features which go together. The second, the last feature, the third feature, is offline dashboard. So this is the ability to take a dashboard or any Squirrel project that's connected to InfoBurst through a cache to be able to burst that, deliver that out to end users with up-to-date data in it in such a way that they never need a direct connection back to the corporate servers. So it's one of the things we've heard a lot from people is love Squirrel, love what it can do, love it connecting to my database, but it's really hard for me to send this maybe to partners or suppliers or customers because that would need for them to have a connection back into our corporate systems, which really is IT security, are saying we just can't do that. So this is a way that you can get that same functionality to them without having to incur the wrath of IT security or the security people in general. And so if we come back to Squirrel, we'll have a look at this. This is going away in the background there. So I'm now going to open the last of my dashboards, which is this dashboard, cache dashboard. You'll have seen maybe this is a standard Squirrel demo. It's based on an XDC cache created in pretty much exactly the same way as I created the previous cache. It's just the difference here is I've got two different caches inside this. So a cache is actually quite a sophisticated beast. The one we saw before was just a single data source in it. But if I come back here, log out as Alice, okay, and then log back in with admin rights, like that. So now we come in here, go to my webinar, this dashboard cache, we see that I've got two different data sources in here. So you can manage multiple data sources, and they could be from completely different databases. They don't have to be from the same database, the same type of database even. One could be from Excel, one could be SQL Server, one could be Snowflake. They can all be mixed and matched. And then those will come in here, and they're just being bound into the data areas in this sheet here. And really, this dashboard here, all of this would have worked. So when I come in and look at this, it goes and gets the data. I can do the time period filtering and all that sort of stuff. That was all pre the new feature. So all of that would have worked before. So the only thing I have to do here is go into the new offline thing and say I want to enable offline dash support. So now I come in and I preview, and the same thing here. I publish, and I'm going to say, I'm going to put this time I'm going to put it in this folder here, and I'll tell you what, InfoBurst content, because that's one of the folders I've set up to be managed as part of my InfoBurst deployment. So I've got put it in there. I'm going to call this manage dashboard. Again, I export it as a .dash file. And this is being emailed around, so I might want it to expire. So I'm going to set this to expire next week, because, as I say, this is maybe delivered outside my organization. I don't want that data around forever. But having done that, I can then export into my InfoBurst content folder. So that is to export. We'll wait for it to export to make sure that it has done. And then if we come to InfoBurst content, so there it is. That's my dash file there. Again, I can manage it in my Squirrel project manager there. So if I now come back to InfoBurst, what I can say is I want to add a new document, and that new document is going to come from a network folder, and that's that folder I set up before, Files, Finance Dashboard. So I've added that there. So I've now added a document, and InfoBurst automatically will know that it's got a cache in it. So now I've got, and I could go in here and create a new burst, and a burst is something that will schedule this, but in fact, I'm just going to click on here and it'll do it all for me. It's added my finance dashboard here. So I've got my finance dashboard. So I now have to, if I'm going to deliver it offline, I have to add a delivery method. So I add a delivery, and you see, now we're in the world of InfoBurst. We've got all this power, because we've notched Squirrel into this, but now I've got all these things. I could send this over email back to the InfoBurst portal. I could do a SharePoint FTP, all these capabilities. I would love to do it by email, but I don't have an email server set up for my local InfoBurst system. So I'm going to do it to a network folder. So, and the folder is going to be just that folder we saw before. And the file name is going to be Finance Offline. So I save there. Now, what you would normally do with this is I would come here and I would go and do a schedule, and then I would schedule this burst to run maybe every Monday to Friday morning at 9. People get their data, and that would take the latest data from the database, package it up with the dashboard, and send it out. But what I'm going to do is just do a test run here. Do I want to run it? So that's going away and running it as if it had been scheduled. So that should now take that, get the data, package it up, and send a file back to that same folder. There we go. That's completed there. So I come back here. See, I've now got this finance offline dash. Now imagine, because often you would do this through email. Imagine that's an attachment in email. I just double click on it. It opens up the new dash viewer, and hey presto, I have all that dashboard with all the data in it. And let me just come out of here, and just in case there are any people who are skeptical, think I'm somehow cheating. Obviously I can't go off the network, because then I would lose connectivity to all of you, but I can turn off my InfoBurst server. I turn off my InfoBurst server, come back, double click on this, and you'll see that no InfoBurst server, no connectivity, but I still have the ability to get all that data and do whatever I want with it, as I did before. So incredibly powerful way of delivering a dashboard, particularly outside the firewall, where getting a connectivity back into a corporate data source through the firewall is going to be difficult. So just to summarize, InfoBurst is a remarkable platform that just does so much in terms of managing data, getting it out to users. One of its taglines is they're getting the right information to the right person at the right time so they can just use it. And it does that because it's got so many different capabilities to be able to, different data sets, different visualization capabilities, different ways of delivering it, and delivering it as a visualization, delivering it as a data set to Tableau or Power BI really is extensive. But it's not just the the superficial features. It's also all the admin sort of stuff that I can retry. I can schedule things and retry them and stop retrying after a certain amount of time and get alerted if things go wrong. It really is a proper platform for doing this. Even if you don't have Squirrel, you don't want to use it with Squirrel, I would look at InfoBurst for that. But with Squirrel, it adds this amazing capability to get at back-end data sources, particularly through the SQL data source, out to just about every database in the world, and with read-write connectivity, what we saw with that updating of the database through the retro toys example. And so that's all been there for a while. But what we've added here is that ability to save into the InfoBurst portal, so that you can see Squirrel content in the portal, and that portal can be secured. As you saw when Alice logged in, she only saw the dashboards and the folders that she was allowed to see. So again, a really nice way of delivering inside the firewall the Squirrel content, but then also opening up this capability to have internal content inside PowerPoint, which wasn't possible before, had to be in the cloud. And even though that is actually quite secure to upload models to the cloud, even if you're going against corporate data, it's sometimes a blocking point for security teams. So now we can take it all inside. And then finally, the dash viewer, the offline capability to be able to take dashboards offline, or actually not take them offline, send them offline. So they just appear in people's inbox, or they appear in their SharePoint portal, so they can see without having to have connectivity to the underlying data systems, but they have the latest data in there. If you want to try this for yourself, many of you will already have an account with us. You can sign up at Get Started if you haven't. If you want to try some of the InfoBurst stuff, then get in touch with us, either our account manager, or if you don't have an account manager, send me an email and we can set you up with the, because the free account doesn't have the InfoBurst connectivity in it. You won't find those connections that I had there, but we can turn those on for you very simply. And if you want a trial access to InfoBurst, we can arrange that as well. So if anybody is interested in trying this capability, these new capabilities, or indeed just the remarkable connectivity that InfoBurst provides for Squirrel, then absolutely feel free to get in touch. And so with that, that's the end of our content. So if anybody has any question, then I will type them into the chat. So David, hi David. David Bear has asked the question: do end users who are viewing a dash offline need to download the dash viewer? Yes. So that's a great question, David. I forgot to mention that. So you have to. There's a tiny install kit that you have to download and run locally in order to be able to view an offline dash file. Once you've done that, as you saw, you just double click on it and it opens up. And also, would that work on an iPhone? So the unfortunate answer to that, David, is no. Currently, that viewer is only available for Windows. You can only view a .dash file offline on Windows. But that's certainly something that we will look at in the future to expand. There's no reason why it shouldn't be available on mobile devices and Macs as well, but that's not something we have done so far. Thank you so much for coming today. You can tell by my voice that I am sort of excited by the capability and what Squirrel and InfoBurst can do previously, but now definitely with the new offline PowerPoint and portal capabilities, it really does take one step further. So with that, thank you all for coming. We will send the recording out as soon as it's ready. But for me, that's goodbye for today. So goodbye.